I'll be really comfortable by the end of this.
All right. Okay, I'm going to count to 3, and then we're going to clap at the same time.
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Okay. It's just sort of a slate.
Uh-huh.
All right. So, hi, Sharon. How are
Hi,
you?
Jay. Nice to meet you. No.
Well, I always start out conversations with a simple question, which is, what's your water, and what's the water that you first fell in love with or first connected with, and that original water story in your life?
So for me personally, it was, water meant sheer joy for me as a child. We played all summer long. We had a lake in the backyard and a small swimming pool. And as children in the neighborhood, we would just rage in the water all summer long, water games, swimming. It changed for me and became more medicinal and more of a therapy with the death of my father at age 16. He commits suicide, and I found myself seeking refuge in the water and going really deep. Long showers, bath time, whatever I could do to really submerge myself in water and help heal.
Did you just figure that out? Was that just a natural inclination to go to the water to grieve or therapeutically?
Yes, and it was a little odd at the time because I would be in the bathroom for hours in the shower, in the dark room, and I kind of went deep.
Yeah.
My sister would be banging on the door, "What are you doing?"
Get out of the shower.
Get out of the
Yeah.
shower. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I realized after a little bit of time, and I would create better structures for doing that. But yes, it was instinctual.
So we could cover all 7 ages of water right here in this conversation, but we're gonna focus our attention mostly on birth, although we've already talked about play and we've already talked about death. But your life is devoted to bringing babies into the world and working with women throughout their pregnancy, particularly in the labor phase and in delivering babies as a midwife. And you've helped hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of families come into the world, become families, including ours. So you were both of my daughters and my wife's midwife, and you were there for us. And I'm going to lose it at some point during this conversation completely because I don't know why. It's very emotional, but including you were at our daughter Grace's 16th birthday last month. And so you've been part of our family since before we were
And you
family.
feel that bond, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
It's a deep bond.
Yeah. And so let's talk about your work, and let's talk about birth, and then we'll bring in the water component.
Okay.
I think there's a parallel to our relationship to birth that goes right along with our relationship to death and this conversation about Blue Mind. That what I get a lot of times when I talk about Blue Mind in other parts of the world is the eyeball rolling, the oh, that sounds kind of hippy-dippy, Santa Cruz-y sort of thing. And the same thing with your line of work too. And you happen to be in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and you've been to a few Grateful Dead shows, so
I'm the Penn hippie,
yeah. So there is some truth to that kind of pushback. But what we're seeing is that sort of modern medicine and mainstream is kind of catching up to the idea that there is a better way to be pregnant, to labor, and to give birth than the one that we've sort of crammed people into really in the last 50 years. We've gone away from the natural, and for good reasons, but let's talk about that. So the big picture on midwifery and the evolution that you've seen.
So I am a home birth midwife, so I do unmedicated deliveries in folks' homes. I work with each individual family, each woman and each family to meet their needs, to figure out where their fears are, to build relationship, and to best serve them on an individual basis. Yeah, and then we see through the delivery. If it becomes high risk, one thing that's important too, we're doing low risk at home. If for some reason somebody risks out of care, we transfer in. We go to the hospital and we, do not proceed at home. So we're doing, we get to select the cream of the crop as far as our clients too, which is a benefit we have.
Right.
Our stats look beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people want this choice.
They do.
They
Yeah.
want to be empowered and they want to have the choice to be able to labor as they want, to be able to give birth in whatever position they want, not to have standard protocols, and not to be exposed to unwanted germs and things like that in the hospital setting.
So you come from, it turns out, a family of women who have been involved in this work. Your grandmother that you learned was a
Yes,
midwife.
both of my grandmothers. So originally, I didn't really realize as a child, I knew that my grandmothers knew each other. They were both OB nurses. It wasn't until more recently or after I became a midwife that I went back and found out that my paternal grandmother had actually been a lay midwife in Pennsylvania, that my father was born at home in the 1940s. It was just something that kind of wasn't talked about anymore by the time I came along in the 60s, 70s. It was kind of what they used to do. But they were both very strong OB nurses and have been throughout my childhood.
So even in your own family, you can see the history of how the idea of being born at home was just normal. Where else would you be born? And then in the last 50 years, that started to shift, and it wasn't even talked about that was part of your grandmother's careers. And now we're seeing the shift maybe back to being born at home as an option, as a choice.
Yep.
That is safe and available to more and more people, right? And so actually it feels like a revolutionary or radical act to even suggest that you might want to give birth at home in this environment. And but that's changing too.
That's changing,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. So let's pivot and talk about water birth, because this is a workshop about water.
Absolutely.
There is an option called water birth where you can labor and in fact give birth in a pool of warm water. And that's one of the things you specialize in, is allowing that to be available or an option for your patients, your clients.
Yeah, so all of our clients, whether or not they have a strong idea or desire, we want them to have access to a birth tub. It is a wonderful tool for taking the edge off of pain in labor. Often it's interesting who comes in and interviews with us and has a strong idea that they want a water birth. There is a consumer demand for water birth. And it's also interesting the folks that don't think they want it, and when it comes down to it, you put them in water and it's the best thing in the world for them. The edge is gone, they relax into it, it's an amazing experience.
So describe what it actually is. So if somebody decided they wanted to give birth here.
We have inflatable tubs that we bring in. We have hoses. We ask everybody to get their own hose so that we know it's clean and that kind of thing. The tubs inflate in about 5 minutes, and then each person gets their own personal liner. We clean them and everything like that, but the liner makes it their own personal tub. And then we fill it full of warm water. We don't want it too hot. Usually, 99 to 100 is the perfect temp. And the mom just gets into the water. And the tubs are large enough so they can kind of lay back so that their partner can get in there and help support them. They can totally submerge their head under the water if they want to. And they're usually about waist deep. By the time you're sitting in it, it's pretty deep, good volume of water. And it's up to them whether they want to, how long they want to stay. Some women are in and out of the tub. A lot of women, it's not uncommon for them to be in the water for about 4 to 6 hours. Usually that's pushing it. Usually, by 6 hours they're done. The waters work their magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us the story of someone who made that transition from, you know, the typical land birth to a water birth, and how that helped them, or how that made a difference. And you know, you've dealt with many situations and circumstances, and so bring that together sort of through a story.
So the one birth that really comes to mind for me is I had somebody that was 8 centimeters. They were almost there. 10 is complete. You can push a baby out at 10 centimeters. I was checking her cervix and a contraction came and she's no, no, no. And each no, the cervix shrunk, you know, right around, it just got smaller and smaller and smaller. So she didn't think her water had been broken, and she was concerned about, she'd had a previous hospital birth. And if you're in the hospital, they don't let you in the water when your membranes have ruptured. So she was like, I can't get in there, I can't go, I can't. She, you know, had this story in her head. So I encouraged her strongly to get in the birth tub, and she did. And we had a baby within 25 minutes because she got in the water and she just went from stress and angst and no, I can't do it, I can't do it, it's all wrong, it's all broken, to, you know, the next contraction hit and she just slowly, quietly breathed through it. You know, and this was somebody that was pacing the floor. Everything's wrong. I can't do this. It's broken. It's not going to work. And I've seen it time and time again. It just takes the edge off, and they just relax in a way that
Works.
works like a charm.
Yeah. And so there, you know, it's I haven't had that experience, and I won't, but I can relate to that red mind, the stress, the somewhat, and then that transition into blue mind, getting in the water and just feeling like that relaxation, which then allows you to do the thing you were trying to do. So just even taking it out of, you know, the birth context into a broader lifelong context, that water, even just closing your eyes and imagining the water can help you relax and be better at what you do. In this case, the thing you're trying to be good at is delivering a baby. So what are the, you know, it seems obvious, right? I think we can all kind of say, wow, that sounds great. You know, you bring a tub in, you could bring it into a hospital room, you could bring it into a home, you inflate it in 5 minutes, you put the liner in, you've got warm water, you're in it, and you know, in many cases, this actually facilitates a more comfortable labor and childbirth. What are the barriers between where we are as a society, or where we are globally, and this, you know, solution, I guess you could say, or you know, an option for people? Why is there such a gap, and how do you think we get through those walls and push through those barriers?
I think consumers want it more and more. They're becoming more educated about the benefits of water birth. I think I would love to see every single woman, regardless of the setting of birth, have access to water and be able to birth in water. It's going to take hospitals getting behind it. So far, I know one hospital in California that offers it. And I hear more and more rumors of, you know, of them facilitating little faucets and spigots and things like that. Women just being able to bring in their own tubs, the inflatable tubs, and I think education of doctors and care providers. It's a different process. When a baby's born into water, they are little slower to come around in a sense. They don't necessarily submerge and take their first breath initially. They take their first breath when they're brought to the surface of the water. And when the air hits their skin, it gives them that reflex to take their first breath. That doesn't happen when they're underwater. So some babies can be under the water for a little bit of time. I think that scares a little bit of hospital providers.
Yeah.
Or they need more education. They need to understand the process is different.
I can imagine one of the things I've heard is, you know, people say, well, so if a baby's born into water, you know, won't they drown? And I think it just requires that realization that know the baby who's just spent 9 months underwater. And so that transition from water to water is in a dimly lit room in warm water that's about body temperature is, pretty smooth, relative to a transition to bright lights in a cool room. And again, you said that, that the air on the skin, that's really what
So
triggers
to
that.
me, I equate it to jumping into cold water when you go, and you take that initial,
Yeah.
to me, the air hitting the skin, that's how I relate to it.
And going
So,
from complete darkness to lights in a clinical setting is those are the first lights and first vision that that baby has ever seen in its life. Right? It's been completely dark. You kind of equate it to a float tank. These float tanks that athletes and others use to calm their minds are dark, warm, and quiet. And the baby has been in a float tank called mom for 9 months, and then is transitioning out of that and that situation. So pretty can be a pretty abrupt moment, and if that moment is soothed a bit through one option being water birth. But I remember when Dana was in labor, I had knowledge of some music made by, so I'm going to bring this full circle, music by Mickey Hart, who was the drummer for the Grateful Dead. It was called Music to Be Born By. And he and his wife made this music, mostly drumming, in response to their own family and wanting to have just really relaxing, rhythmic, calming music. And water and music kind of often play the similar role in this conversation, not just in birth and death, but throughout our lives. Carry lots of memories, help us relax, help us get jazzed up, help us focus. And the science of our brain on music is far more advanced and accepted than the science of our brain on water, but we're getting there. So you bring music into the birth setting as well, of course, right?
yes, as desired, of course.
Yeah,
I would never put my music on a birthing woman. It has to be her choice.
right.
It's pretty amazing, though, what women will instinctively, the playlists that they'll put together, and they know what they want to hear in labor.
Yeah.
Each woman makes their choices.
Right. Mickey Hart is on the board of a neuroscience research institute in New York that is focused on advancing some of these ideas and is very active in this space. So
Of course he
maybe
is.
we'll get him. Maybe we'll get him over to a Blue Mind conference. So this this is sort of setting the stage for our entire conversation about the 7 ages of water, but also setting the stage for the power of storytelling and our first and perhaps most beloved story that we tell throughout our lives is our birth story. I'll share just a little bit. I was adopted, and so my birth story was a blank. It was a black box. I didn't know. I had no story, and so that's kind of unusual. But I remember seeing a video when I was a kid and you'll know exactly who these people are, but there was a Russian doctor who started to pioneer water birth. And I remember seeing this video as a kid, and it was just, all I really remember was there were like hairy people in the water, and there were babies being born, and there was blood and nakedness and hair and babies. And I remember, and it was sort of, it was very 70s style, kind of like, whoa, that is intense. And then my response to it was, I was a water baby. I had a water birth because I had no idea. I convinced myself that, so that became my story. I made up my birth story. When I met my biological mother, I asked her, and no, I was not. My imagined scene was not actually what happened. It was much more clinical and typical, a New York City bed-based birth. But you help create our daughters' birth stories. they know how it went down because they get to talk to you about it and talk to us about it.
Yeah.
There's some great photography, and some great phone calls that were made on winter solstice from Grace's birth. And but that's your job, is to not only make sure it's a safe process, but also create
The story.
that first story, and make sure it's as beautiful as possible, because we will carry
And that
the
it's
stories.
the woman and it's the family story. It's not medical protocol that's impacting that. That it is their story. It's their family story. It's their part of their history. And that they're choosing how they welcome that baby into the world.
Yeah. Well, there's so much to talk about in this big story of birth and the connection to water. But I always like to end with sort of a provocative question, which is, you kind of touched on it already, but what's your wildest dream? If you could just make the world move in a direction that would make things better, your big audacious goal, what would that be for all of us?
For each person, for each woman that's giving birth, to be educated and empowered and able to make their own choices, and for them to have access to water. And it makes such an impact. If there was one thing that I could do, that's, and I do. I try and strive to do that for each family that I serve.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing some
Absolutely.
personal insights, and thank you for helping our daughters be born.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
So you heard this idea of story, right? We talked about story, and your birth story is actually one of the most important stories you tell. It doesn't have to be your birth. It could be your birth into this world. It could be the birth of your children. It could be the birth of your company or an idea or your passion. But our brains are hardwired to hear and receive and tell stories. Since the beginning of time, we have communicated with story. But somehow along the way, we've lost that, and we communicate with details and data and facts, and we lose people. So thinking about how you can actually connect to someone through story is vastly important. And the neuroscience of storytelling is really fascinating. It goes very, very deep, but essentially if you can tell an emotionally charged story and you really have someone captivated, the same part of your brain that's lighting up while you're telling that story is mirrored in the person listening to that story. So the empathy that's being felt is very deep. And so being able to tell that story, your birth story of yourself, of your company, of your idea, of your passion, of Blue Mind is critically important. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to do that. I'm going to have you pick something, some creation story that's important to you, whether it's your own, not creation, that might be a little weird, your birth story is probably better. Your birth story, whether
Origin.
it's your own, your kids, your company, a passion that you have, what you do day to day, but start to think about that. And I'm going to ask you to pick a partner in the room and share that story. And I'm going to give you kind of 5 minutes each to do that. I have a question here, yeah.
Have you guys ever heard of Griot?
No? Has anyone heard of
GRIOT?
a griot?
Yeah, they're African oral historians.
Yeah?
And they teach people with drums walking in the waters.
Wow.
So they have branches in the water, a drum circle, and they would tell the history of whoever was in front of them, their channels. And so,
Wow.
it's
This is
very
your griot. You get to become the griot then, is that right? You can use the drums.
GRIOT. I do play the bit.
There you go. Awesome. GRIOT. Griot. Yeah. Cool. So grab a partner up. Your birth story, whatever birth that is for you, but start to think about how you tell that story. And I'll give you kind of a couple minute warning, and you can switch partners, but pick someone in the room and go through it. Thank you.
I'll let you guys do it. I'll find the odd person out there.
Thanks.
You guys have an odd number too? Oh, yeah? It's all right. I bid all my life. Don't worry about it. There's nothing you can say that'll offend me, trust me.
I know, right?
No? Okay.
I don't have any kids. So I can't talk about that. So I think the cost of stuff. Do you have something in words?
Let me turn that one on.
Because right now, there's
and he wasn't quite ready. And so that's about all I know about my actual.
I'll take that one step further. So I just the last 6 months, the very beginning stage of starting a company with a student of mine who has graduated. And so you might have been able to tell from my little talk with Jay yesterday, one of the main things I'm trying to do is get people to kind of stop eating animals and eat lower on the food chain, eat plants. And I've been vegan for 24 years, and it's been a long time. I've been vegetarian for 27, so it's been a long time. I was vegan before no vegan was. And I'm really into food, and I've been turning people on to plant foods for decades, and people always ask me, oh, I can eat like this, I would go vegetarian, or I would this. So finally I thought we need to come up with a company to help people transition. So anyway, that's my origin story, is that I have a company now. We haven't sold, all I've done is spend money. We haven't made any money. But we're in the very, I have 3 jobs, he has 2 jobs. It's hard to start a company when you have, full-time.
Yeah.
But we're doing it. It is, but it's not, it's different than the current model. It's not the kind of prepared foods and all that. What it is
It's funny because they
we have a database. We've identified plant-based substitutes for all your common foods. Most of your food comforts, burgers, sausage, bacon, ice cream, yogurt, milk, cheese. Right.
the doctor.
Right, well, it's a plant-based version. Right. So, and the tagline, we're playing around with, I think we got a good one, but it's basically,
Because,
the model is,
like, the best form of birth control.
so it's a delivery service product, it's not a prepared food, it's not a thing, it's not like it's all big oil,
So much
spice, so they got, you have to take it at night. What it is the best products in these different categories.
So I have birth stories for my nieces and nephews, but
It's a weekly delivery, you get a deposit.
I would say like a year.
Walk into your regular, and then you can see what it's like, what kind of great favorites on this. Also, like, I'll pop to the zip code, we'll give you the best restaurants in your area. You can go and choose us, we'll give you a discount. And then it's kind of a transition point, and we're seeing, and we think it's got, we're looking for investors, and we're kind of getting the basic partnership.
So, I applied for this job kind of on February. Yeah. drive. On the drive here, I felt like kind of rebirth that it was all that old baggage, all of that behind. It's a very typical story of moving, you know, but like really was moving a chapter and turning it. It's such a better experience happening every year.
But also the thing is that you can get them on burgers and the veggie bacon. It actually tastes so good. Right, so that's the thing, that's what I think it's about, right? Is that you don't
Clue
have
what I'm
to
getting myself into.
you can just eat the veggie ice cream, the veggie cheese, you know. And actually the substitutes are really good now. The technology is so good.
Yeah.
There's a couple brands that have just in the last year that are outstanding. Right, so that's that. So the thing is, a lot of it doesn't taste good, and a lot of it's just so many different types. And you're talking about veggie cheese, it's 10 grams. Veggie milk is 20 grams, right? And so what we've done is we figured out that that's a lot of it isn't good. And we're gonna do the hard work. One of our slogans is we do the hard work. And then we're never gonna get. And that's what's happening for a lot of people. Yeah, so that's kind of also we're targeting on this. We're not even using plant-based, and it's just how to. It's a transition plan.
I made a lot of improvements for myself when I moved here. I wish I'd really I'm not a journal type of person, but sometimes I wish I was. Just like, you know, 'cause I remember like making a lot of improvements, and then several of them I'm especially on. There's some on there that I'm like, I should have a reminder of that.
As if that's a bad thing. It's amazing, but yeah.
I'm so sorry, I was just
Yeah. All right, awesome. Yeah, you did. I wasn't going to go there, but I was going there. All right, you're going to talk about plants on now. Not like it as an addition. By itself.
And I'd been out to sea on a research trip, which I've done some definitely science, background. But that really wasn't where my passion was. My passion was nature. And so it's interesting because a lot of people are nature poor, rightly so, that I and I'm not a search for
Alright, you get that.
You want to do a test?
Yeah.
And so we will do on 3.
Okay. But I want to ask you. And Open the door.
So, large apartments, so my role is specifically managing personal well-being. We also have a manager who oversees all the trips, his and that's been a great year that well, we're an informal ed organization, so we Aquarians have a team of staff or teacher professional development. So it's teacher institutes, so teachers, they come and they want to get, they have to continue education. But we give continuing education credits. Majority of our teachers are from credit, they come. And so most of our programs are year-long. We start off in the summer, it's 5 days in the summer. We immerse the teachers in outdoor science. So we take them kayaking, take them a local sloop, take them to the beach. We do as much experience as possible. Because what we want to do is get them to making their own concepts. So our goal is to do authentic science. So everything we we talk about the theory behind teaching this way, and we can provide them staff. So it's all about getting kids outside, obviously, and my opinion, because my great band, so we have one for yeah.
I'm studying ocean cultural resource management. There's some resource in the form of monetary we're more focused on economic side. Anyways, ocean coastal resource management under the umbrella of
Come to agreement on how those two things can work together.
under the umbrella.
Science,
No, it's more like it's under the umbrella of national
STEAM,
level.
putting the art in there. It's education jargon. STEAM, yeah, STEAM is the new term. It doesn't exactly, absolutely.
like we said, this is an important story. One of the most important stories you tell. So many of you are probably still telling that story. But I am going to send you to a short break. So if you want to continue the conversation, please feel free. But get some daylight, get some fresh air. I am going to give you, you'll notice that I will never give you a normal amount of time. I'm going to give you 16 minutes for a break. Who can do the math? It's 10:07. You need to be back at 33. Okay, back in the room at 33. There's some snacks out there. Get outside. There's water refill places all around here. And just on a logistics note, there are 2 bathrooms back here on this side too if you need the restroom. They're water themed, which is even better. But as we transition, as you think about this, continue to tell your stories over break, but we're going to transition after break from birth to death. So kind of a big leap for some of us. And so start thinking about, as Jay said yesterday, instead of putting it at the end, we really want to put it close so that we can talk about it early on in the 7 ages. And so we'll come back in. We have an opportunity here from an amazing speaker around this experience of death and water. So I'm going to give you 15 minutes, not 15 minutes now. Now it is 15 minutes. So 33, back in the room, and please enjoy your break. Thank you.
It's actually 23.
Okay.
23. 24, I guess. It's 10.
Yeah. I was like, that math isn't working in my head. I'm like, I know it's 10 minutes, but I know. How was that for you? We went through our stories. Whereas morning, Paul. I'm so changed. Oh, that's probably a smart idea. Yeah, I was like, I guess I'm in my yoga clothes today. So, yeah, it's actually probably my normal wear. So, it makes me feel comfortable. I'm just not quite stressed out this week. Yeah. Yeah.
Threw his hat out, and you know, it kind of just kind of classically floated away in the distance, and it was that like the journey and affirmation. Somehow that was okay, like, because it ancestrally,
I need any
right?
help. Nope. I'm all good, thank you.
Following his freaking like helping orchestrate this activity. That just came to me. It was like, yeah, I did that.
And I'm thinking, okay, did I steal it somewhere? Where did this come from? Because I've never heard it from a facility. No, I'm sure. There's lots of possibilities, right? Like we're in the right places. This is, I do love teaching and their masters. And so the thing I offer them, and that, yeah, that'll be 2
it's definitely.
Yeah, yeah. All the way from the floor up, and the men were just like their mouths were on the floor, like, what? And she thought, you know, and nobody, she went overtime and nobody got in her way. Like, no, you just, the older woman is like, give her respect. She's seen it done. Yeah. Yeah, it was awesome. And she just kicked off. And they were all like, whoa, yeah. Yeah. It's like, so after she left, we're like, I need a cigarette. You know, like, it's a, and then the guy after was just like doing his feet like next. He's like, well, I don't know how to follow that. But I gotta say,
Get on the batteries now. Is it coming? Okay. So it's batteries.
yeah, and they talk about like she just talks about the patriarchy. Like, why do you think women?
When I bring up the gain way high,
Yeah, now it's coming in. That peaked a little bit.
I guess it's just
Yeah, I guess it's just not a super high volume mic. Hello. We good? Is it coming in? Hey, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see her. I had this little moment in my head like walking in the class. To see her. It's so bizarre.
Just remember that.
Yeah, it's for Bobby's.
Yeah.
Death, life, afterlife, death, grief. And if you don't bring up afterlife,
I think it's really important. However people interpret that as, you know,
Yeah, and then
we all
I'll-
live forever.
So he also wants to, so you want to put it back in that where it was there.
Yes.
Like,
You do a great job of taking that conversation and not letting it get pushed into the box. After life, you're about to and so people can access that conversation.
You know, my mom said the first time that I was on the beach and saw it, like I was
And my main thing with Blue Line is
like a crashing
don't let it get derailed by
short break. And they said I was just like, I was just the power of that, everything else just like one.
that to me is
They thought I needed the water to get my in the class. I was just like, what? Yeah, here. I mean, even like, yeah, we'll take a look at it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. You know, I walked for it.
there will not be a Blue Line exhibit
I've always been that one.
at all the if this is
and the one, you can do it one of the ones underneath the agenda, because we don't need it like, we'll flip it and put it on the.
They not like the, not like, no, not like the
We have done that. Oh my God. Right?
yeah, or the,
You're in Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico, because it's the Atlantic Ocean, so it's still have turbulence. But it's still beautiful. You still have good cities, sections of streets. The more Caribbean like. But I was, I thought I understand that, and at least, you know, like you wipe out the strip there, eventually you get, I mean, yes, you can get pulled out of the rip, but eventually you're like, fuck. Shore break, exhausted. And,
Good idea. So I want to tell you the best
oh my God,
spots, because I checked all the same spots. Is see where that heater is?
and there's a lot going on.
The heater's not on, but like just between the heater and the building, that's the best sun spot. So we checked them all.
Water enough that I did a few minutes, but the reason why I wanted to become with a guide school was that I could be a participant and not a passenger. So I could stand here and I would be able to see myself and not be so dependent on them. So that was my intention to go to guide school. I'll never pretend to be a
last season, and then 5 seasons. So the first day of guy school. Well, no, the river guy, taking people down the river, but yeah, you're responsible for, so you have to learn how to rescue and everything else. But honestly,
Your film is so moving.
Oh, thank you.
it's self-rescue. There's only so much a guy can
Wait to
do.
see it.
A
How
lot
long
of
do
times
you
they
think,
fall
what are
under
you
the
shooting for
water.
a certain length?
You're gonna get separate, yeah, you gotta be faster.
We don't know yet,
That's
so
what's all
early
the shower.
in the process that we're trying to figure out, well, not trying to, we will, along the way, projects kind of tell you what they want to become, and I think sometimes they can't.
Right.
We're not, we can't get to you.
And we,
Self-rescue. You
literally
need
started.
to be aware of these hazards.
Wow, just give them birth. It's a birth story.
reaching,
Right.
hopefully we're gonna
Right.
come into some water.
We're like eggs and we.
We'll put
First
some
day guys school is
Yeah.
easier than last day guys school.
In
labor mode.
in labor
Or
mode.
you worry about.
But no pain, still in.
Well, that's like, I was,
Rapid, you know, like, you know, you're up regular.
it's not, you know, labor because someone's quartering you in the town square.
Yeah, all the things that you have to do, like.
It's intense and it's important.
If you love it, it's kind of good labor.
So no, I don't wanna be a part of it, but I'm gonna say, like, be part of it.
It just makes you really.
She had 3.
Yeah. You've got 3 kids.
She's ready for 4.
How old? 23, 20, and almost 17. Wow.
Yeah, it's a whole other rapid, you didn't even.
Yeah.
Was it good? The sound?
Yeah.
Yes. I'm Megan, by the way. I've had for you. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, I'm loving all the hugs.
I'm good.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I think they have. Most kayak companies, what they do is like, won't cancel.
Oh, she's gonna need a new stick now.
Yeah, that's fine. But if it's like, those guys, they won't, they probably. Yo.
So we'll have to make sure, so tomorrow we'll have to swap.
We have this, we have the crowdfunding thing, I got 2 of the production.
So put kayaking as an option on there still.
It's good. What's refuge?
Yeah, it's good,
So now,
but I'm having triplets.
no, it's dead free.
What do you have?
There it is.
You know, we did these, like,
The oxygen.
did these very,
You know, so we're gonna have another two. So we're gonna try to make it pretty decent, but the kayak
we
one.
get to, he's useless.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
By number 3, I was a lot more relaxed.
Why not?
What's our,
No.
I think we should know what to expect. But I think just say sign up and I'll tell them to like do it for you. Maybe we can say like, we're gonna get this many people.
Do you have them all, did you have all 3 of those children at the same day? Or over different years?
Yeah, that's fine.
So we'll get you on.
I mean, so he had said something about triplets. They were triplets.
Oh, no, I was joking. No, I'm having triplets now with the 3 guys.
So I'm asking, you had your children over different years or on the same day?
I was, we're flipping through it, and I was like, we were reading something, I was like,
That's shocking. But what newspaper was it?
it was, Santa Cruz something or other.
Oh, the Good Times.
Yeah, it was,
In the insert for
Yeah,
the
yeah,
city?
totally.
Yeah, awesome.
and you're at the end of the line there.
Yeah,
with,
yeah,
river guides all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. No, but I've been on the other end of it. I've been 17 and 20 and 23. And I want to let you know, like, this is the toughest it is. And that it's just gonna get better.
And then kayak, we decided
It's so
to
true.
we take.
Oh, absolutely. These are the days you're gonna look back on and be able to tell stories about.
In the hospital.
In the psych ward.
Yeah, all the stuff that's happening now is the stuff that is intending to be funny. Otherwise, you would have investigations about that.
Yeah, sometimes when I'm going through something really difficult, I try and do like the funny cocktail version of it. 'Cause
Yeah.
it worked, like it removes it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we have the
10
time.
years from now, it will be funny. Yeah.
Yeah, we all said it.
It's so
Cheers.
funny.
Great. Let's do it.
It wouldn't be funny if it wasn't difficult I already decided I do.
Like in other words, if there's 6,
And what is your name?
it seems to me that we want to have 2.
We handled it. We just handled it.
12?
We have a stem cell film, actually, but we're actually creating a stem cell network where country, pilot program where physicians and clinics across the country are getting stem cell treatment to veterans first. And then if the pilot program proves anecdotally that this is helping, then we want to publish and make it, well, it's gonna be actually more bigger. And then we're doing this thing for this blind kid who was America's Got Talent, who was semi-finalist, and he got gene therapy sort of so you have this international songwriter who's writing a song, well actually he's not writing, he gave him a song to record that was gonna make the film. And it becomes a big hit, and then all the proceeds come to this organization. Remember I asked you about like they were having a fundraising thing and it was big. That's the same organization.
I mean, if there's a lot of it, if you want to sell it, say, kayak experience,
You and my son have really nice green jerseys. Are you serious? That's how this is on my.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what we need to do.
it was a yellow boat either for my period, I didn't know. Like, that's what you always see. Kylie on the more
We'll figure it out.
and then right after that, we'll try that.
So kayak, we're gonna do it one more.
Sticker, yeah.
Other than yoga?
Yoga, and then reflective time, so like people feel like they need time on their own and not trying to like go take a walk or do whatever.
So this kid,
Singing, they can do that.
Are we offering?
So what I'm saying is, are we like?
Seems like an odd. I know, because now I can't remember the name. I actually
so gene therapy.
because I have communication. Nice people. See if I can find. 10:31, I can't even remember now.
We have a Blue Line song through Sasha wrote it. And then we filmed it.
In my phone.
I mean, what we say that objectively, not what we're talking about. So it's not a matter of, just we're proud of them.
Yeah, and it's so funny in this industrial store that we live in. I've never seen that. Yeah. They're comfortable on it. Also, I've been into the last summer in Wisconsin.
And then the really intense thing, my other like really cool best friend, this guy named Robert Morris. He is like lived through his combat stuff. It's just like you hear him talk, and he's been with it before the UNP.
I had to get Monte.
Yeah.
Take hacksaw.
We come here for what?
Sam, give me 12.
Are you from Monterey or?
No, I'm traveling.
And to get dead back to the helicopter process, you won't need shit. Forget about social. Get your son with cerebral palsy. Or some type of.
Yeah, go to school, see a party I used to do. Yeah, since then, Luke taught me, stuff like that. We're both in Ocean Coast.
How long is the break?
2 years.
That's just my situation.
I'm always value
Diane about death.
Okay.
And
See the tall red blonde?
yep. Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Text messages and snacks, you can bring them inside. Bring in your snacks.
Of what water does, like the benefits of it for like, you personally, and then you hear someone confirm, not confirm it, but make it sound like it's okay to talk about water in an emotional way. It can sound weird, but it's not.
One is from inside. I'm just gonna move them to this table. One of them is. That one is. I love the chocolates.
So is the Mass Maritime Academy affiliated with California?
What did you decide to do?
Yeah, well, I love the international law class.
He actually almost taught there.
I mean, I'm moving forward, but still, if I'm being honest, taking these 2 weeks just to finalize things, just because I can see, I don't know if I explained it as much as,
We don't need to get into the whole thing here.
okay, yeah, probably don't have time for that,
But I just curious.
yeah, I'm just deciding if I need the time to do art and explore where that fits into my education. So it's just hard for me to make the decision just because I can.
Yeah, follow your intuition. That's huge. Intuition is like, it's not like a sixth sense. It's a subconscious level of your brain processing information that we can't really do quickly enough. And it's too complex. So like, it's your subconscious level like doing the cost benefit weighting for you. You know? And so it's like your intuition is doing the like. So if it leans one way, then it's.
All right, team. So, good break, good sunshine. A little blue mind. If you walked a little bit down the path, you can actually see the ocean right outside. So we talked about story, and I wanted to kick off this next section as we get to start around a story. So an origin story. And I'm going to ask Jay to come join me up here, and I'm going to ask him to hold one of these things. How many of you know what these are? Okay, handful of you.
These meaning the marbles.
A blue marble.
Yeah.
So Jay, tell us about the Blue Marble and the origin story of the Blue Marble project.
Yeah, so many of you are probably familiar with why and how we share these blue marbles, but about a decade ago, I was giving a talk at the New England Aquarium. I was invited to give a talk at the aquarium, and it was a daunting invitation because it was going to be in their IMAX theater, and the screen is like 7 stories tall or something like that. And I was thinking, okay, boy, if you ever, like a PowerPoint's one thing, but a 7-story tall PowerPoint is a whole other thing. And I was reviewing my talk, and I was thinking, wow, man, there's just a lot of bad ocean news. And I started thinking, we ocean communicators at that time were just sharing relentless bad ocean news. And it wasn't really motivating. It was actually just bumming people out on a large scale. And so I thought, how could I change that up? I mean, I don't want to hide the bad news. I want to talk about it, whether it's fisheries or climate change or plastic pollution, all the things we're all working on. So I decided that I would give these gifts. And so ran out to, literally in Boston, ran out to the toy store near the aquarium and bought all the blue marbles they had. And that was a little bit tricky because some of the marbles were in bags with other colors. And so I ended up with a lot of marbles that weren't blue. And so got this bunch of blue marbles. I stood at the door as people were coming in to the theater, and I gave everybody a blue marble. And they looked kind of like this. And people said, "What's this?" And I actually wasn't sure yet. I just knew I was giving everybody a blue marble. So fast forward to the last slide in my presentation. So 7-story tall. It was the photograph, the first photograph of the Earth taken by NASA astronauts back in the 70s. And that was the last slide on the screen. And it all came together. And I said, take out that blue marble that I gave you on your way in. This is it. This is what that blue marble represents. Marble is what we look like from 1,000,000 miles away. And so if you hold your marble up right now and hold it out about arm's length, so those with long arms might need to pull it in a little bit. So talking about you, Bianchi, there, you got long swimmer arms there. Hold it way out or bring it in. That's about 1,000,000 miles away, right? That's what we look like if you could fly 1,000,000 miles away and look back at where we're sitting right now. And so the people who get to do that are called astronauts, and then there are the rest of us who dream maybe about doing it someday. And that perspective is humbling. It reminds us that we are living on a water planet. It's actually pretty special in the universe as far as NASA scientists know. Right? There aren't a lot of water planets. In fact, when NASA is searching for life in the universe, they have an acronym that they use. It's FTW, which stands for follow the water. So first they look for the signal of water, and then they consider that maybe those water planets could have life. So a special home that we live on. It's a reminder that everything we do matters because we live on this little water planet. The good stuff, the bad stuff, the big stuff, the little stuff, and that we do everything together, right? You don't do anything alone, even though you feel like sometimes you're alone. Even the shoes on your feet. It probably took about 1,000 people to get those shoes on your feet. From all the materials, the construction, the transportation, you tied them, you put your feet in, but 1,000 other people made those shoes. So being here today, this is a massive collaborative effort to be here. Not just our team, not just you, but so much more. You thought it was just a marble, but that's just like metaphor for life on our water planet. And so we've shared, since that first experience, we've shared 1 million of them. And you could say that the Blue Marbles project has gone viral. They've gone to every continent. They've reached lots and lots of people. And with that simple reminder that your blue marble shared with gratitude, it's a reminder that we live on this water planet. And if you get one, you're meant to pass it on. So that was the message at the end of that first talk. And I got more positive feedback than any other presentation I'd ever done about the ocean, because people talked about it. And they talked to people they wanted to say thank you to. They shared their version of this Blue Mind message. And so that's why this marble has become sort of the symbol of the Blue Mind movement in a way, because gratitude goes way further, faster. than fear and making people feel bad. We've kind of exhausted, I think, the potential for making people feel bad and guilty and angry. We haven't come anywhere close to exhausting the potential of gratitude and love, which is kind of a nice segue into the conversation I'll be having with my friend Diane about love and death. So take your marble, keep it. If you need more, take them. There's a jar of them. Pass them on. It is addictive. If you start giving out marbles to say thank you to people, you will possibly get addicted to sharing marbles. It feels really good. I think it's a dopamine addiction, in fact, not to get into the science of marble sharing. And then share. These are great props for sharing photos, too. Wherever your marble goes, some people have already been doing that. Take a picture of your marble at the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Take a picture of it down by the water. Take a picture of it with the person you give it to and share that. It's another excuse to keep this Blue Mind conversation going. So that's where, not everybody knows that that's where this project started, back at the New England Aquarium, but it has kind of gone global and viral pretty quickly. So our goal is to pass a marble through every single hand on Earth. That's ridiculous, but that's our goal. So that's our an aspiration. Yeah.
So Jay, I think these have gotten into the hands of the Dalai Lama, Steven Spielberg. It's been
James Cameron took one to the bottom of the ocean before he passed it on. Jane Goodall's gotten one.
Yeah.
Morgan Wiley has gotten several.
I have several. But I think that the interesting thing about this is just a thing, right? It's a thing, but once you add a story to it, it becomes important. And so how you create and you tell those stories are important. And so as Jay said, as we invite Diane to come up and join us on the stage and they get settled, thinking about how you use this and you keep it and you pass it on and seeing when it comes back to you is really interesting. I was actually at a coffee shop with Jay earlier this summer, and we met a guy there who ran kind of a float tank establishment that Jay had actually floated in and wrote about it in his book. And the guy, and Jay, of course, in Jay's fashion, takes out a blue marble and hands it to the guy and tells him the story. And I ran into this guy 3 days later at a conference in San Francisco, which was like 45 miles from where he was the day before. And he goes, "Oh, yeah." And he pulls it out of his pocket. And I was like, oh my gosh, this guy is literally walking around with this marble. But because it had made such a profound impact on him in this story, it was a really amazing thing. And so now we have the opportunity for a very special speaker, Diane Gray, who is the president of the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross Foundation and runs Hospice Communication, president of Hospice Communication. And so we are going to be spending some time talking about death, which is a topic that many of us shy away from. It can be a heavy topic, but a really important one to have conversations about. And so we're thrilled to welcome her here today and to have this conversation.
So Diane, you know how we like to begin these conversations is with a very simple question, which is, what's your water? What's the water that you remember, fondly or earliest or have the deepest connection with in your life?
I love that question, and first of all, thanks for having me here. Water to me is the beginning of my life story. And, many people think, oh, she works in hospice and end of life and grief care, and, oh, I heard that she has this other story. But what they don't know often is that, my connection to water started when I was very young. My dad used to race boats, and he was always in around the water. We grew up in Florida, but my dad died of a heart attack at age 39, and I was 9. And the one overriding and overarching memory I have with my dad is that we were sitting on the beach in the water, and the water was just kind of coming up over our legs, and I was 7, and he just scooped up this shrimp, and said, look, see, Diane, look, so much is here under the water, so much is here. And it was kind of like, and I was thinking, oh, I love spending time with my dad because it is the most fun thing, and you never know what's going to happen. Every day was a science fair, right? But that is my overarching great memory of my dad, who died shortly after that.
So your water is your dad and that ocean
It's my
combined.
solstice.
Yeah.
It's my place that I go to for change. You know, when I know that when I go to water, it's a time of change. It's a time of a place of solace. It's a time, a place for reunion. All of it.
So your life's work is, well, touches on so many things, but you, when I describe you, I describe you as someone who makes the conversation about death and grief in life accessible and even joyful and beautiful. And most people shy away from find real discomfort in talking about death, talking about their own death, or the potential death of loved ones, or even remembering loss of loved ones. And so we tend to not talk about it until we have to, and that makes it a lot harder in many ways, which is one of the reasons why I wanted you to be here, talking about it today. But it's also one of the reasons why you suggested that we take the conversation, the seventh age of water, death, and bring it forward and combine it with the conversation of birth. And so that we can, really we're doubling down on the idea of the death story being a beautiful story. And so we're going to get to the water part of the conversation. But let's just kind of start with really a more general sense how you approach your work and why you are. How did you find yourself in this position? It's not something you probably as a kid thought, I am going to help people work through end of life decisions for a living.
Right.
But you are among the best at it, and so how did you get there from younger Diane to this point?
Well, so first of all, to go back to the genesis of what you're saying is this. I truly believe that if we can talk about death, it frees us up to live life. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I want to live life like, woo, in a big fat, in a big way, big, juicy, bodacious life. Fun, laughter, sex, love, joy, sadness, sorrow. And once we get this thing that happens, it's going to happen anyway. We do die. Scientifically, we die. It's a moment. It's a blip. So once we get that conversation sort of out there, and it is shocking what happens about the ability and the capability of all of us to live these like, whoa, bodacious moments. It's very freeing, actually. If you haven't tried it, try it. So, but my story, no, I didn't set out to do this. My dad died when I was 9. Heart attack, here today, gone tomorrow. Last day I saw him, Christmas Day. Had the conversation, got the phone call. But I will tell you this incredible thing happened. And it really, to set this up to what you were saying earlier, the last time I saw my dad, he was leaving. My parents were separated. And he was leaving, and I ran outside, and I listened to my intuition. And it said, go now. And I ran outside, and I ran out to my dad's car, and I said, roll down the window. Roll down the window. And he rolled the window down, and I said, thank you so much for my Christmas present. It was a pendant watch. I was 9. Greatest thing ever. And I said, roll down the window. And he rolled it down. I said, thank you for my gift. Thank you for my present, my watch. I love it. I said, I love you so much. And he looked at me, yeah. And he said, I love you. I love you too. And he rolled up the window, and he backed down the driveway, and that was my last conversation with my dad. And I came to understand years later, like 5, that, wow, everybody dies. Scientifically, physically, we die. But if you're going to have a last conversation with someone, whoa, how lucky am I? I was pretty lucky. So from there, my mind and my research and my work started, going toward love and fear. And death is fear. It's fearful. It's fear-inducing. People are scared. It's the great unknown. We don't know, right? So what happened was, fast forward, like a lot of people, went to school, studied, neuroscience, neurology was my thing, studied sports medicine, sports management, and then got married, had kids, and my son ended up with a rare 1 in a million brain disorder and suffered immensely for 14 years and profoundly. Cognitively intact, could tell you he wanted to watch this movie, that movie. His sister was bugging him, et cetera, but he was in bed the last 5 years of his life, nonverbal, unable to move, completely able to communicate via blinking and smiling, tube fed, but with this still no cure to his disease, we had to remove nutrition and hydration, remove water and food at the end of his life, still no cure. And my son died 18 days later, and when he was 14 years old. And his birthday was yesterday, by the way.
Happy birthday, Austin.
Thank you. So, and I'm so pleased to be here during this important time. I choose where to be. I consciously choose where to be on his birthday. And while I wouldn't have chosen American Airlines all day yesterday, I chose to be here with you because I really believe in the work that you're doing. But fast forward, Austin died. And the gist of it is that in my life with him, because we chose to live, if this is the finite amount of time, and the doctor said 2 years, but it ended up being 12, thankfully, we chose to live. We pushed back the furniture, we cranked up the music, we went to the beach, I took his jogger, and I put his O2 tank on my shoulder, and we would run down the beach, run. And I would have my daughter on my hip, she was 4 years younger, so I would have her on this hip and the O2 on that hip, or she would walk, and we would just go down the beach, or we would twirl. I would hold him under his shoulders, and we would twirl around the beach, but the water was where we connected. We did things, of course we swam with dolphins, and we sat to the ocean, or we would have picnics in my car because he was in a wheelchair. So I would, in a minivan, I would open the door of the minivan, and we would go and sit with our very unhealthy fast food item. But we would sit by whatever inlet waterway, and it's where we would commune. And I would put a blanket out, or we'd sit in the car. It's what we did. So as Austin grew toward the end of his life, we, again, the very last days of his life, you could tell what agitates people. If you've ever been around someone who is seriously ill and dying, you can tell what agitates them, and then you can tell what brings them peace. Austin very clearly had a preference for dolphin sounds. I searched every movie, every soundtrack, everything so that I could find them, and he clearly had a preference for dolphin sounds and the water. And we also, throughout his life, the one thing that we did was, took him into the pool. I built an in-ground hot tub because that was where he found tremendous relief and solace.
And you had to push through the system or ignore it in many cases in order to have your son in the water. Just something as simple as getting this young man into the water because it was his medicine and you knew it and he told you, showed you. So describe that. You say running 50 feet of tubing out from the house out to the water so that you could have that experience.
Yeah, it was funny. Excuse me. In Austin's case, I knew that he loved the water. It's where, his very first trip ever was to the Cayman Islands when he was 9 months old and still healthy. And, we were adventurers, and I don't know, it's what we did, who we were. We would eat by the beach and sit in the ocean, and that's how I raised my kids. So even though Austin was in bed the last 5 years of his life, life was meant to be lived. And I knew that I would ask him, and I'd say, do you want to go in the pool? And he'd blink yes. And so I asked our nurse, I said, well, can't we hook 4 sections, so 200 feet of oxygen tubing, can't we hook them together, connect them together, and run them from the concentrator, which was in the guest bathroom, out to the pool? I'll just pick him up, I'll carry him, I carry him everywhere else. I'll just carry my 5'4" child and hold him in the pool. Because when you're in a bed and you are paralyzed, basically, and you cannot move, imagine the weightlessness of floating in the water and the stillness. I would put my palm under his sacrum, and his head would rest here, and we would, like a shark, you know how a shark, we would go like that, and it would free his spine. And he would breathe and relax, just pure weightlessness and the peace that would come with that. But nurse number 1 said, "You can't do that. You're going to kill him." And I looked at her like my terminally ill child who's going to die anyway. And no, I'm not out to kill my child. I love my child more than my own life. And so the shift came, and she, you know, was very angry with me for even thinking of this. And nurse number 2 came, and I really wasn't I was trying to learn, oh my goodness, am I doing something wrong or dangerous? Is there something that would, and she looked at me and she said, no, it's like, you ever watch MacGyver? Like, we've got to live life, and we have to be creative in how we approach life and death. So let's be creative here. Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Let's put the tubing together. So we ran 4 50-foot sections out into the pool. I picked up my child. She was there, a nurse, a medical professional, if things go wrong. Someone to back me up if things go right, and we go, check this out. So we checked all the boxes, right? It was amazing, a life-changing moment for me, and I would believe for him because of the peace that he felt. So yes, we had to bend the rules and be assertive, not aggressive, but assertive in saying, look, I'm willing to take this chance to live. Let him live. Let all of our loved ones live until they die.
So we've worked together a few times at some hospice conferences to try to share this water connection in end-of-life care through personal stories, but also to broaden it out to this group of professionals,
right? And
to explain how the example of Austin can be applied to people of all ages who are going through this transition towards their death. And seems to me there's an intuitive acceptance, and then the nurse number 1 scenario, and then the reasons why this doesn't work that are, from what I've seen from the medical community, all of the reasons why the answer is no are one by one knocked down. And so the provocative proposal here that we've been sort of delivering through this conversation is, like water birth, perhaps water death. What would that look like to offer the choice in end-of-life care and even final moments to say, would you like to be in warm water, resting in a peaceful place, if that is, in fact, a peaceful place for you? I will sign up for that right now if there was a list to put my name on, if that's the way it goes down. I know both of my fathers who died over the last several years would have chosen that if they had that opportunity. They both loved water. And so that's kind of maybe an interesting place for us to go here. So what does water and death look like? If we take the Austin story and that intuitive response that you had as a water lover and that he had as a water lover to bring more water into his all of his years, but especially towards the end, that was a relaxing place for everybody. How do we take that out to the world and deliver that option? Is that even feasible, and how could we do that?
Well, sure it is. So first of all, many hospitals have a water feature within the hospital environment, and I understand the way the United States healthcare system is set up, that it really is about Medicare, Medicaid reimbursement model and all of that, and a westernized medical system. So many hospitals have a water feature. They have a fountain, they have a lake, they have waterfalls in around it. There is no reason that many patients cannot be brought. I took my son out of the hospital room. We were there for 32 straight days when he was in the 4th grade, when he was 8, 9 years old. It was horrible. They said he was going to die. And I said, I want to take him for fresh air by the lake. It will calm him and soothe him. And he's in so much pain, and we can't get the pain under control. Come on, let's be creative here and see what we can do. So when we talked about that, it worked. It was effective. So in terms of a water death, what a water death might look like is, not every single patient is immobile. A lot of dying patients are mobile. You can put them in a wheelchair, and there are Hoyer lifts. The Hoyer lift can lift gently the patient into the water. Now, some of it is timing. Death is an event. It happens like this. So, actually, dying process is longer. So I can totally see that people would love to be, in the water as part of their process, as part of their journey. The moment of death, would it be beautiful if people could actually die in the water? Oh yeah, and we often know that people, we have signs that we see that when a person is dying, the breathing is labored, things are different. I wonder what would happen if we had a dying patient in the water. What would happen to their breathing? What would happen to their pain and the constrictures and things like that if it would open up the patient to be more comfortable? I envision that it would be for many patients. Certainly not all can experience that because of certain medical issues, but absolutely, I think it would be a beautiful way to die.
We discussed earlier in water birth context, the acceptance of the role of music in birth, and it's the same thing in end-of-life care and death. Is music is often brought into the care environment. Music is used therapeutically, and so maybe water can also be used in that way to bring back fond memories, or even asking someone, what's your water, and would you like to go see it one more time while we can? And then doing it and figuring out the sometimes complex logistics of that expedition in some cases, or that visit. And my biological father was dying of pancreatic cancer, and what he wanted to do was get to the Atlantic Ocean. He was in Boston, and just daily if he could, until he could no longer make that trip. And that really was his, you could say medicine, not to cure, but just to soothe and to reduce pain.
But soothing medicine or soothing care is called palliative care.
Right, exactly.
Palliative care is comfort care.
Right.
So that could be a part of his protocol, if we need to list it in terms of palliative care protocol. It could be part of his living while dying.
And so just to take the limitations away, what would palliative care through a Blue Mind lens look like? It would look like a visit maybe to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, a walk along the path along the waterfront, maybe getting out on a surfboard, and even if you're not able to paddle, you could be pushed along in the ocean, or floating down a river, getting in a pool. There are so many ways that we can offer palliative care through this water lens, I think.
Absolutely, and science backs it up.
Yeah.
We know that research shows, first of all, that skin-to-skin connection is powerful. We know that it's healing. So imagine skin-to-skin connection, one person holding another in the water. It kind of goes back to that whole watery womb that we talked about in death, or in water and birth, now water and death. Think about it being near the water. There are a million ways to be near the water, even if it's your shower, your bathtub, or the sound of water as it's in a tabletop, waterfall in the home, or an app if you're limited. A lot of the hospice nurses that I work with, and palliative care nurses and physicians, use the app, to just sort of calm the mind, but also to help calm the patient. It really does work.
And so a big part of your work is not just with people who are dying, but with the people who love those folks who are living through it. And so you work with grieving and loss and mourning a lot, and you're in my life, I've relied on you for your insights and your experience when I was going through both the care of our daughter as well as the loss of my father's. And we're often left in that, in that grief moment without the skill set to deal with it. And really, many people find themselves in that place with no idea what to do. And the default might be to soothe ourselves in ways that create more problems, right?
Yeah.
And whether it's drugs, alcohol, or just like being numbed out and dropping out, getting super depressed, or I'm going to go into all of it, but rather than doing things that are healing and helpful and healthier in response to grief. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, and especially the role of water. You've thought a lot about the role of water in grief, both personally and professionally.
So what that looks like to me, anyway, is that, look, a lot of people, when they have a loved one die, they feel as though they are going to die. The pain is so enormous and so profound and searing, they can't fathom how they're actually going to live through this. And imagine the shock that happens a week later, or 2 weeks later, or a month later, or 6 months later, and you're still waking up every day. That's a shock to some people because or they feel like, oh, are you kidding me? I'm still here? Like, I thought for sure I was going to die because this hurts more than anything I've ever been with, and I'm not sure I want to live. And then guess what? You're still here. So it gets to the point where we say, well, what are you going to do about it? I don't want to be here. I'm going to, drink, drugs, sex, gambling, stay in bed, whatever the choice is. And they're choices. So then as soon as we start realizing, uh-oh, I still feel terrible, and I'm still here, whether it's 6 months, a year, 6 weeks, whatever that number is. And we know that grief does not have a finite number of days.
Right.
So then it becomes the question of, uh-oh, what am I going to do about it? And then that question ruminates for a little bit, a few days, a few hours, a few weeks. And you realize, what do you mean? Nobody told me I have a choice here? I have a choice in how to live? If I'm stuck here following the death of my most loved person, I'm going to have to figure out how to live. And one of those choices is, we know, exercise changes the chemicals in the brain. But we also know that water is a powerful part and can be a powerful part of anyone's healing process, the healing of their grief. And I'm talking about deep, profound grief. Why? We know that being, as you say in your book, being in, on, near, around, under the water helps people to heal their grief. And here's the big aha, folks. I don't even know why people don't talk about this. If I told you, so I work with thousands of people a year that are either dying or grieving. So many people cry in the shower.
Yeah.
And when I say that to somebody else, I say, do you know how many people cry in the shower? Yeah. How many people cry in the shower? I say, mm-hmm. And then sure enough, somebody that's standing by goes, I cry in the shower too. No kidding, really, that's so cool. But they don't talk about it. Why? Because they feel A, shame because they're crying, or B, guilt because of something that's associated with the dying person, right? Or the death itself. So shame, blame, and guilt. And so why? They go into the shower and man, it all comes out, right? Or they go to the ocean. So it absolutely is a part of a healing program, just like healthy eating, just like exercise, just like music. We know through neuroscience that music helps to heal. But when you combine all of those, imagine what happens to your brain when you combine, and this is evident in Stanford research about being in nature and walk and exercise, right? 20 minutes. Imagine when you hit the trifecta and you go, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to exercise in nature, near the water, listen to music. You've got the,
Right.
and you're eating healthy food.
Right.
What happens?
And it all sounds so obvious, but it gets pushed into that, that touchy-feely box, or that, and we're not.
But it's science.
But there's science to back it up, and that's really what I think is so exciting about right now, this time we're living in, is some of these intuitive ideas are now getting some research to back them up, and then we can kind of move forward and begin to just teach people so everybody knows, oh, when you hit that wall of grief, here are some ideas, and you've been told it enough times that you know that that's what you can do. Because when you're in that red mind mode, your ability to think clearly, you sort of you default to your level of training, as they say in the military. You don't rise to the occasion. You drop to that basic level of training. If you had no training, well, then you're lost. If you've been told over and over through an educational experience that water is one of your options, then maybe you'll use that option when you hit that wall. And that's our goal, right?
Right. Because, and also too, and I want to bring this up. Here's the thing, we are in America, where so many people just want a quick fix. They want a pill. Just give me a pill and I'll do anything to avoid this grief, because this is the worst pain I've ever felt emotionally. So they want a quick fix. And so they've also been told they need to go to a psychologist in order to talk about their grief. And here's the thing, the big aha, being near the water for many people is free.
Right.
It's free. You don't have to pay a physician to go walk the beach or to go sit in the ocean or be by the near, or even use an app or sit in the shower, whatever. It is readily accessible and it's free.
You get that water bill once a month, but it's pretty inexpensive. It's a pretty good deal, really.
It is a good deal.
Yeah. And so let's also go, we don't have a lot more time, but I want to talk about, so I'm going to tell a story as a way into this, because when I lost my dad, my adoptive father, he was unconscious, so I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to have him roll down the window and have a last conversation. It was a traumatic brain injury that led to a week of a coma, and then finally his death. And so that was missing. There was something missing, and I did speak to him. We did share music. I talked to him a lot, told him that I loved him, and so it was kind of carrying this. There's this missing thing, and so one night, months later, I had a dream, and he came to me in the dream, and he was naked and he was thin. He was moving slowly, but he took me by the hand, and we walked over to a well. And he said goodbye, and then he dove into the well. And it was like so clear. I was like, Dad, what are you doing? Where are you going? Down to the well. I was like, okay. Dad's diving into the water, and he was my water. He was the guy who taught me to swim, and so there's the end of life care, there is death, there's grieving, and then there's this thing that sticks with us forever. It's the love, it's the afterlife. However you think about that, and so there's so many spiritual traditions or lack of spiritual traditions and ways of thinking about what happens next. But what does happen is that the love of the people you love carries on, and that you have these experiences and memories, whether it's during a dream or in the middle of the day. And I think, what would my dad do? What would he say? And then I hear him say it, and it guides. It got these, our lost, passed away loved ones guide us continually, and so that is most clear for me when I'm by the water. And we have a whole process that many people want their ashes scattered over the water, or we take our loved ones' ashes to the ocean or to the river for a reason, because there's something about water that opens us to that ongoing conversation, right? And so you've thought about this a lot, and I want to go there before we wrap up.
Okay. Yeah. Well, quickly, you brought up two topics, and I want to. So if we look at it chronologically, a lot of people in memorial service, they will bring the body. In different cultures, they'll bring the body down to the river, the ashes, or they will scatter the ashes in the ocean. That's very common, as a way to just be free, finally. after whatever disease process, or just that's their preference. But I want to address more succinctly what you talked about, this issue of reconnecting through water. You know, a lot of people are taught to fear sadness and fear crying and fear going as deep as they can in their emotions and the emotional well, so to speak.
Right.
And so there's nothing to fear.
Right.
Tears, water, are a natural part of our body. It's how we release emotion. And being near the water is a place to reconnect with those loves. The number one thing I hear from people when we do afterlife conversation has to do with, why aren't they sending me a sign? Why aren't they showing up in my dreams? I'm doing everything I can, Diane. What am I? I was like, blah, 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 you know, noise, 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 noise. I said, okay, have you gone to the water? Have you just found a place of quiet where you can rest and relax? And nature frequently is a conduit for that type of reconnection, right? And that's a lot of scientific reasons, and that's a lot of spiritual connection as well. So it doesn't surprise me that your dad would say, here, walk with me and come and visit. I mean, my son visited me, and I was so surprised by this particular visit. The shortest version is that somebody rolled him into a room in a stroller, someone who helped to care for him in his early years, and I peeled off this very fine layer of like tissue paper, like papyrus, and he rolled out of the stroller and into a bathtub. And it was as real as me sitting with you right now. And I got into the bathtub with him, and he said, I thought I could come with you, and I would let you hold me for a while. And I'm here with you. And I thought we could do this. Like, I'm going to come and visit you every now and then, and this is what we'll do. I thought I could come and you could hold me for a while. And he does come to me, and I do hold him for a while, and it lasts all day, that feeling of connection. And that happened in the water. Water is an amazing place to reconnect. Is it everybody's thing? No, I'm sure it's not everybody's thing. Maybe your thing was in a train or in a plane or in a whatever. But I do know this, that when we, as the human species, amp up the noise, it's harder to hear, right? The subtleties of life. And you know, you and I spoke a lot during that time, you know, at the end of your dad's life and in your grief. And I would just encourage people to, you know, if you're looking to reconnect, include water as a part of that process, because what it does in the mind is it quiets it down to a place where those other gentle reminders of love and connection can come back in. And even though the body dies, and we talked about this, the body dies, that's the DNA, the cells, the blood, all of that goes away. We know that the soul, for many people, though certainly not all, can exist. We can't do a soul transplant. We can't measure the soul yet in terms of science. But for many people, the soul is their connection to love. And that love is energy, and energy is everywhere, and it's neither created nor destroyed. So I would encourage people to seek out water as a part of that process of reconnection. I've spoken with thousands of people who reconnect and have their own water story in a river, in a tub, in a shower, or in a dream, in a watery-like dream.
Yeah. It's it just reminds me. I like to spend time walking along waterways, rivers, lakes, and then the California coast. Our family has walked the entire California coast from Oregon to Mexico along the water. And one of the things you find around waterways all over the world are memorial benches. And the benches are always facing the water.
Yeah.
And they're always named for someone who loved that spot. And I imagine that those benches are frequented by the people who loved that person. And so we know this. We know that water gives us that space to reconnect with those we've lost in the places that we loved to spend time together. Mm-hmm. And that is so often overlooking beautiful bodies of water. And I think just to kind of round out the message is when we talk about the true value of wild waters and oceans, let's include this conversation. Let's include the nostalgia and the memory of those we care about and have lost. Let's include the powerful role it can play in soothing our grief and mourning together. And let's include the option of getting in that water one more time while we can, while those who are dying are still with us, and getting into the ocean or onto the water, onto a boat, onto a surfboard, onto the beach. And I think that will make our pro-water message even more powerful, because we'll connect to more people in a more universal way. I think that's really what I always hear from you, is that it opens a whole other door for the way we can communicate about the importance of water.
Well, think about this. I mean, our bodies are made up, what's the percentage of water?
Yeah, 75,
Okay.
65.
And if the moon can move the great oceans of the earth,
Yeah.
and we're made up of 75% of water, people ask in their grief, why am I so sad? And, it's a full moon, and is there a correlation? Well, yes, it's possible, that your
Could be.
emotions are going like this, right? And changing. But the same thing happens when we're near the water. We're born of a watery womb, from a watery womb, and we also seek water in our death and in our grief. It is a natural part of our existence. It is who we are. And so why not start to reclaim who we are, rather than what Western medicine has told us a process should be? I mean, there's no time better than now to really start to reclaim and become empowered to say, wait a minute, this might be what we've done, but this is who I am, and I want to be who I am.
Yeah. And that's the point is that we don't have control over our birth stories, but we can, in a much more meaningful way, control our death story and the end of life story, and lay that out for the future. And so we talked a little bit about that control thing. That's why people do like to write down the rules of how it's going to go when they're gone. Like, take my ashes to this water, and there's an element of control there that we can influence. But I want to ask you one more sort of big thinky question, which is, in your wildest dreams, in the context of death and end of life care, palliative care, and water, what's your wildest dreams? What would you like to see happen in the world, if you could sort of wave your magic wand and make it so? What does that look like in your mind?
I think in the area, first of all, that to live life fully, but living life fully right up until that very last second of life, that is death, but then also live life fully in your grief, and to empower yourself, allow yourself to make choices over how you're going to live up until the moment of death, which includes understanding the amazing properties of water to help live much, much beyond what our limited thinking currently tells us is possible. And then the same for grief, to use the incredible healing properties of water in your healing of your grief journey. And it is a journey, it's not a switch. So understand that you are much more powerful in your own life than you can even, we turn the power over. We go to, certain professionals and we say, just tell us what to do so that the other person will do it. And I'm here to say, no, you have the choice. Look, death happens. It is going to happen. That is where we are right now, scientifically, at least in this part of our lives, right? So if that's possible, true, we know that you're going to grieve. And if you're going to grieve because you love, then why not say, oh my goodness, I have choices to make since I'm going to grieve, and I want to do it really well. And part of that includes science and exercise and nature and all of that, but also the amazing healing property of water.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for sharing all of that and taking on this journey here. So
thank you, my friend. See you. Yeah.
Very good.
So I think I'd love to play on something Diane said, which is living life fully, which is, I don't know anyone that doesn't want to live life fully while we're here. And part of living life fully means diving deeper into some of those emotions and some of that fear that we kind of set aside sometimes, especially when it comes to death and transitions and letting go of things as they happen. And so we want to give people some just reflective time. Many of you have lost people in your life who you've loved dearly, right? And that was a transition, and you've had to dive deeper into that. Many of you are going through that now. Some of you may have friends or family members who are experiencing that. And so what we'd love to do is kind of take two things that Diane mentioned and really put them into play. One is exercise, and the second is water. So we are in the perfect location for that, because as you walk through this door and you walk out and turn left, the ocean is right there. So we're gonna ask that you take some time. It can be reflective time by yourself. You can grab someone and have a conversation with it. Maybe you wanna talk about someone that you've lost or something that you're going through right now, but grab a partner or take a walk and get down to the ocean and just take 15 minutes or so. And when you come back, lunch will be set up here and we'll kind of have some time together and then come back into this room by 12:15. But really take the opportunity to get in front of the water, especially when we're so close to it. So with that, I'd like to give Diane another round of applause and thank her. And then invite you to take a walk outside down to the ocean and then join us back for lunch. Thank you. Wow, guys, you had me like crying. Like, great, how am I gonna get?
Try not to. I was like, it's okay to cry. It's not okay to just completely lose your
Because
shit
then you
and
can't-
not be able to continue the conversation.
My problem is
Yeah.
when I cry, I can't
Bawling
speak,
is
so
not-
it's like
Yeah.
pausing. But I'm like one of the messy criers.
Oh, I'm glad that was you back there. I was like, wait a minute, I'm feeling
When
my.
you off, right?
Beautiful story about your dad. You know,
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Oh man, I woke up after that dream and I was like freaked out, but not in a scared way, but in a like it was.
It's big.
Like it was so.
Thank you for
It
doing
was
that.
like
Awesome. It feels so good in here with the air in. Huh? Good, thank you. Okay, we're off. Yeah, I think we're good. Everything's, oh my gosh, this food smells amazing. So as they're out, maybe we can, so we need to get forks out probably. And then, oh, he has them on the other table. What do we have here? Okay. She was awesome, yeah.
Wow. What a person to have on your team.
Yeah,
do something like
oh
that,
my
right?
gosh, yeah. Because it is like a lot of people, you know, like, I mean, I do it. I shy, you don't want to talk about it, you know what I mean? Like, you want to just set it aside, and get